Even though it's universally beloved, Back to the Future isn't without its imperfections. The producers were crossing their fingers that no one would notice the glaring bloopers. Come with us as we reveal the secret error they attempted to remove from the annals of cinema. The McLorean's brief journey with Stoultz. 40 years have passed since the release of Back to the Future. The exploits of Doc Brown, Marty McFly, and their iconic DeLorean time machine continue to captivate viewers. The Back to the Future backstory wasn't always ideal, but in the end, we got one of the best 1980s films. It appears that Back to the Future had more problems than the average film. Production on the film was almost halted. Everything from controversial casting choices to dubious artistic choices will be covered. The fact that this film was finished is nearly surprising. It was fortunate that we were able to witness its breathtaking beauty. Otherwise, it could have bombed or never been released. For Back to the Future, Eric Stoultz was first considered for the role of Marty McFly. He went on to audition, get the part, and start filming. Nonetheless, the producers were confronted with a challenging decision following 5 weeks of filming. They released him and cast a new actor. Michael J. Fox was that other person. For Stoultz, that must have been incredibly humiliating and discouraging. It wasn't, however, due to Stoultz's acting skills. Actually, he has a lot of talent. It all came down to style. Eric Stoultz was known for portraying roles that required a great deal of emotional depth. You can't call Back to the Future a dramatic film. Laugh out loud and enjoy yourself on this hilarious time travel experience. The film's makers decided that Stoultz's somber performance style clashed with the lighthearted, effervescent tone they were going for. Michael J. Fox was, in the end, considered to be the best choice. Marty McFly was given a lighter touch by Fox, who also brought charm and humor to the role. Many were ecstatic when Eric Stoultz was cast as Marty McFly in Back to the Future, but there was real tension between the cast and Bliff. Things didn't go according to plan, though, once filming began. The official reason for his dismissal was that his acting technique clashed with the film's lighthearted and humorous tone. Stoultz was used to playing dramatic parts with a heavy tone, unlike the more serious science fiction adventure that was Back to the Future. However, behind the scenes, more was occurring. As a method actor, Eric Stoultz continued to perform even when no one was looking. He tried his best to stay in character all day, playing the role of Marty McFly. This strategy may work in more serious dramas, but it irritated a lot of his co-stars in this fun, fast-paced film. Thomas F. Wilson, who played Biff Tannen, the bully, had trouble getting into Stoultz's character. Set tensions were raised by Stoultz's grave and dramatic performance. During a manufactured altercation between Marty and Biff, the situation became more heated. Stoultz overacted, and the scenario escalated into an actual brawl between the actors instead than playing the part as a staged confrontation. It was partly because of this feud that the producers decided to fire Stoultz and bring in Michael J. Fox to fill his role. Whenever method acting ran into a frustrated Bliff. Funny mistake in the film occurs when Marty is at the diner in 1955 looking up Doc Brown's number in the phone book. A hand leafing through a book is the center of attention as the camera zooms in. But there's something peculiar you'll notice if you look closely. It seems like Marty, who is a teenager, doesn't belong with that hand. Rather, it seems like an old man's hand, complete with wrinkles and age spots, which suggests they probably utilized a hand double for the close-up. The person who wasn't Michael J. Fox was probably a member of the crew or a stand-in. They weren't really concerned with looking like Marty or matching his age. Find out how Robert Zemeckis delivered the most devastating news of his career, from his confrontation with Wilson to the delivery of the horrible news itself. A day when Stoultz was fired. Not only is it never easy to get fired, but it can be much more difficult to inform someone they're being let go. Robert Zemeckis, who directed Back to the Future, was in this situation. He had the unenviable duty of breaking the news to actor Eric Stoultz that his role as Marty McFly would be terminated. In retrospect, Zemeckis acknowledged that it was among his most challenging undertakings. He went so far as to say it was the most difficult meeting he had ever been to. He expressed his deepest regret, saying he had broken his heart. This emphasizes how emotionally and painfully difficult the situation was for them both. The situation was exacerbated since the studio did not promptly notify Stoultz of their intention to replace him. Actually, he was given permission to keep filming for a few more days, the choice to fire him having already been made. Since Stoultz had no idea that his time on set was coming to an end, he was working really hard. The entire issue became much more upsetting as a result of this. It has been reported that Sir Stoultz's reaction to the news was negative. He found out he was being replaced after dedicating weeks to the picture. Can we trade stars? For $1 million. Many problems arose behind the scenes as a result of letting Eric Stoultz depart from playing Marty McFly. It wasn't just about strained relationships between actors or damaged feelings. There was a major money problem at the studio as well. The cost to replace an actor once filming has started is enormous. The filmmakers had to reshoot every sequence that Stoultz had previously shot when Michael J. Fox was cast to replace him. More work, more time, and more money were required because of this. The cost of reshooting the scenes with the new actor alone was estimated to be over $4 million. Back to the Future ended up costing around $19 million to produce. In those days, that was a fair penny for a movie. The good news is that everything worked fine. With an estimated $385 million worldwide, the film was a huge hit. More than enough to cover the additional expenses caused by the move, that's for sure. The difficult and costly decision to fire Stoultz and start again was ultimately the correct one, looking back. Michael J. Fox's performance as Marty McFly was a deciding element in the picture's status as a classic. When knowledge became antiquated. At one point in the film, Doc Brown puts what is supposed to be plutonium into the DeLorean time machine. He employs a see-through glass tube housing a luminous crimson fluid. But that's not how plutonium looks in the actual world. Instead of being a liquid, plutonium is a solid metal. Its lustrous silver or gray appearance is deceiving, since it undergoes a chemical reaction with oxygen upon exposure to air, changes to a deep shade of brown or black very fast. Oxidation also causes it to become flaky and brittle, just like iron rusts. Furthermore, plutonium poses extremely high risks. You should never handle it carelessly, as Doc does in the movie, without proper protection, as it emits dangerous radiation. Scientists actually manage even minute quantities of it using remote instruments while wearing hefty protective gear. Even if the movie messed up the science, they likely used the red liquid in the glass tube to make it look more futuristic and dramatic. Coming up next, we'll reveal the studio executives' amusing attempt to change the film's title. They turned down the title. Many consider Back to the Future to be the best and most iconic title in cinematic history. On the other hand, the moniker wasn't always well received by those in authority. Sid Sheinberg, a senior studio executive, was one of them individuals. Universal Studios' major boss, Sid, found the title Back to the Future to be misleading. He thought it would deter people from seeing the film. Consequently, he wrote a note and mailed it to the film's executive producer, Steven Spielberg. A startling recommendation was made by Sid in the memo. Instead of Pluto, he proposed calling the film Spaceman. The new title, he reasoned, would be more exciting and go better with the scene in which Marty scares his dad by donning a spacesuit. The famously level-headed and rational Steven Spielberg didn't want to start a fight or offend anyone, particularly Sid, because of how influential he is. Spielberg, instead of flat-out declining the request, sent a light-hearted and cordial message. He sent a letter to Sid in which he thanked him for the humorous message and said that everyone enjoyed laughing at it. Spielberg pretended that the idea was a joke to him. This way, Sid could easily abandon the concept without shame, and the title, Back to the Future, was preserved, which is a blessing. No, there's more to come. We should figure out the fruity lawsuit that almost wrecked everything. The food that caused a panic in the studio. Litigation in the entertainment industry is nothing new, but this one may catch some by surprise. It was almost a lawsuit from the California Raisins against Back to the Future. In exchange for having their raisins featured in the film, the California Raisin Advisory Board paid the studio $25,000. Product placement describes this. Using product placement in films as a means of advertising food, drink, and other goods. It was planned that Marty McFly would have a bowl of raisins in this moment. The sequence they were shooting, though, didn't come out so good. Marty appeared to be eating what appeared to be a dish of dirt, according to writer and producer Bob Gale. This led them to decide to remove the scene from the finished product. The California Raisin Board was understandably irate when they found out their product wasn't in the movie. Since they had already paid, they felt cheated out of their deal. This led them to consider suing the studio. The Raisin Board opted to withdraw the matter, and the studio reimbursed their money instead of allowing it to evolve into a full-blown litigation. The smash hit that nearly didn't happen. A large portion of the pleasure and enjoyment of Back to the Future came from the music. Huey Lewis and the News's The Power of Love is a popular song that features prominently in the film. Surprisingly, nevertheless, this song almost never came to fruition. At first, Huey Lewis turned down the studio's request that he compose the score for the picture. Politely acknowledging his flattery, he clarified that he was unaware of the ins and outs of film score composition. Additionally, he expressed his reluctance to compose a song with the title Back to the Future because he felt it was outside of his usual style. Robert Zemeckis, the film's director, remained optimistic, though. He insisted on involving Huey Lewis in the film. Still holding out hope that Lewis might reconsider, he persisted in making contact. Lewis eventually forwarded a song he had been composing to him. An incident with mismatched magazines. On the bookcase behind Marty McFly as he awakens in 1985, there is a yellow magazine bearing the initials RQ. Reference is an abbreviation for a professional magazine published by librarians who help patrons locate specific types of information. Not even a typical adolescent like Marty would own or read it. This minor point was later covered by producers Bob Gale and Neil Canton in the film's DVD commentary. They admitted that the set dresser, the person in charge of the set's decoration, had made an error. Whoever thought that reference quarterly belonged in a teen's room probably just snatched a few random books and magazines to give Marty's room a more realistic look. The time machine was almost a household appliance. Now we'll figure out why. There was a refrigerator before the DeLorean. The filmmakers had a radical new idea before they used the legendary DeLorean as the time machine in Back to the Future. Using a refrigerator as a time machine was actually their first thought. The creators finally came to the realization that it wasn't the best approach, and it may appear ludicrous now. But initially, it was something they were really thinking about. The idea was for Marty McFly to go inside a refrigerator, and that would be his means of time travel. Before deciding on a specific make and model of car, the studio brass argued about whether the vehicle should even be considered a car. Robert Zemeckis was worried about kids' safety, it turns out. He was worried that, after seeing Marty use a refrigerator as a time machine in the movie, some children could try to replicate his stunt in real life. That might be quite risky. Real refrigerators pose a serious safety risk to children who crawl inside and become trapped. That concern led them to forego the idea of a refrigerator and settle for a car instead. The time machine that hardly functioned following the premiere of Back to the Future, the DeLorean automobile achieved meteoric success. Many viewers wished they could have one after seeing how amazing it looked in the movie. Perhaps it could travel through time just by dreaming. Although it seemed terrific in the movies, the DeLorean actually wasn't that great. It was true that the vehicle was ancient and unreliable. Its many problems and frequent breakdowns caused production delays. More often than the crew would have preferred, they had to stop and fix it. There were other issues than the engine that plagued the vehicle. Not only that, but the car's cabin was quite small and unpleasant. Marty McFly's actor Michael J. Fox had trouble getting around inside. The automobile was cramped, and getting in and out was a real chore. Every time Michael J. Fox attempted to get out of the automobile, he would bang his head on the door. The directors decided to incorporate one of such moments because it occurred so often. Continue reading as we unveil even more intriguing bloopers. The wrong way around to plug in. Marty McFly's plan to play a guitar at maximum volume at Doc Brown's house is one of the funniest moments in Back to the Future. When viewed through the eyes of experienced guitarists, his sequence is incorrect. The massive amplifier is turned on by Marty, who then turns the volume and overdrive knobs to their maximum settings. He then links the guitar to the amplifier at one end. At last, he connects the opposite end to the guitar. If you want to know what the truth is, the second a guitar cable contacts the output jack of a powerful amplifier, you'll hear a deafening popping or cracking sound. Either the speaker or the listeners could suffer harm as a result of this. I don't want to hear it. It's too loud. This occurs because the amplifier is prepared to enhance any signal, even the unexpected connection, since it is already turned on. As a result, the vast majority of guitarists adopt safety measures. Making sure the amp and guitar are both connected before turning it on is the correct and safest way to do it. In this manner, the connections can be established without making a jolt. The moment Marty connected the guitar's cord, the amplifier ought to have gone boom before he played a chord in the movie. After George McFly goes missing, a lawyer becomes involved. George McFly, played by Crisen Glover, is Marty's dad in the original Back to the Future picture. The audience will never forget his one-of-a-kind performance. Glover, however, did not return for the filming of the sequels. Glover went on record saying he didn't agree with the film's theme. He thought it was excessively focused on money and material achievement. He felt that Glover disagreed with the movie's implication that Marty's happy ending was based entirely on his family's newfound wealth. However, some of the film's participants insisted there was more going on. According to their claims, Glover was involved in a conflict with Robert Zemeckis, the film's director, as well as the producers. Also, they couldn't settle on a fair amount to pay Glover to return because of problems with his contract. Even though Glover ultimately decided not to return for Back to the Future Part 2, George McFly was still needed for a few scenes. They decided to reuse Glover's old footage from the original film instead of reworking the script. Another actor was cast to play George. He was made to seem like Glover with the help of makeup and a mask. Anger and indignation consumed Glover at hearing this news. It was his contention that the studio had appropriated his likeness without his knowledge or permission. He decided to sue the film company as a result. Glover was paid more than $750,000 as part of the studio's settlement in the lawsuit. Remarkable U-turn from Mustang to DeLorean. Many viewers would argue that the DeLorean was the film's real star, despite the stellar performances by Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox. The fantastic silver sports vehicle that transported its passengers through time. Believe it or not, though, there was actual conflict behind the scenes regarding the featured car. Finding the ideal car to serve as the time machine was as challenging for the filmmakers as casting the correct actor. There was a time when the film company had an idea. The studio held the belief that they could negotiate a commercial arrangement with Ford if they used a Ford Mustang. It would be great for Ford's promotion, and the movie may get more money or support if it happened. Unfortunately, not everyone agreed. Film producer and writer Bob Gale was very opposed to the idea. He was adamant that the time machine ought to be a DeLorean and not a Mustang. In his mind, the wacky science fiction story would be better served by a strange, futuristic, and enigmatic vehicle like the DeLorean. The statement that Doc Brown does not drive a Mustang was famously made by Bob Gale. What this means is that he believed Doc Brown, a peculiar inventor, would look absurd driving a typical car. The DeLorean was perfect since he wanted something different. In the sequel, Elizabeth Shue takes center stage. The original Back to the Future featured Claudia Wells as Jennifer Parker, Marty McFly's girlfriend. A lot of people probably don't know this, but Claudia wasn't even considered for the part at first. The filmmakers ultimately opted to cast Claudia instead of Eric Stoultz as Marty when the actor portrayed the character changed to Michael J. Fox. When filming the sequels began, though, everything changed. Instead of Claudia Wells, a new actress named Elizabeth Shue played the role of Jennifer. Claudia was not replaced as a result of any disagreement, in contrast to Eric Stoultz, who was fired. She had a deeply personal and tragic motive for leaving. A diagnosis of breast cancer came for Claudia's mother around the time they were getting ready for the next films. During this challenging time, she took the difficult decision to step away from acting in order to take care of her mom. The Back to the Future films were not abandoned by her. For a while, she even stopped acting altogether. Many years down the road, Claudia opened up about what it was like to see Elizabeth Shue play her in the sequel. It felt strange, like an out-of-body sensation, she said. However, she expressed it in a humorous manner. After a while, Claudia got back into acting and even went to fan events for Back to the Future. A little sidetracked in time travel. Marty tries to save Doc Brown in 1985 from terrorists who are about to kill him in this scenario that takes place towards the conclusion of Back to the Future. In 1955, Marty fixes the DeLorean time machine and gets ready to return to 1985. A new time is entered on the dashboard before he leaves. Just 10 minutes before the terrorists are supposed to murder Doc, he sets it. In order to notify Doc in time, Marty plans to utilize those 10 minutes to quickly go to the mall. Marty was free to come in whenever he liked. With the help of the time machine, he can go back in time to any point in the past. He could have done better than giving himself 10 minutes. He could have gone back an hour or perhaps a day earlier. That would have given him plenty of time to contact Doc, brief him on the situation, and devise a strong strategy to foil the terrorists' plans. Doc Brown downsized for the part. Actors' heights vary throughout flicks, forcing directors to get creative. Step stools, clever blocking, and camera angles are common tools in their toolbox for making people look taller than they actually are. But they did things differently in Back to the Future. The actor who played Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox, is 5 feet 4 inches tall. His co-star, Christopher Lloyd, who plays Doc Brown, is around 7 inches taller than him. Filmmakers may find it difficult to depict such a dramatic height disparity. Instead than using special effects to make up for the height disparity, the creative team decided to make it part of the character. Doc Brown was given a stooped posture by them. What this means is that he would stoop and lean forward. Because of this, he seemed a little shorter, and the situations involving Marty felt more real. In all likelihood, Doc Brown did not occur. Michael J. Fox was almost not cast as Marty McFly, and Christopher Lloyd was almost not cast as Doc Brown in Back to the Future. At first, Lloyd turned down the part when the filmmakers approached him. He didn't want to commit to another project because he was exhausted from acting in films and TV. Nonetheless, the production company was certain that Christopher Lloyd would be the perfect fit for the role. They would not allow anyone else to play Doc Brown, the quirky genius inventor. They therefore made great efforts to convince him. It was reportedly a lot of last-minute wooing, including special meetings, delicious dinners, and cordial conversations, before he agreed to take the job. Thankfully, they were successful. The rest is film history after Christopher Lloyd agreed to play the role. An exclusive group of people assembled before Michael J. The most significant casting dilemma with Back to the Future was the decision to part ways with Eric Stoltz, but he wasn't the only one who felt let down by the studio's decisions. The directors examined a number of other actors before casting Stoultz as Marty McFly. Johnny Depp, Charlie Sheen, and John Cusack were among these actors' most famous 1980s roles. Despite their best efforts, none of them were cast in the part. C. Almost got the part instead. Thomas Howell, who advanced to the final audition round. After that, he appeared to have a real shot at landing the role. Nevertheless, Eric Stoltz was ultimately cast by the studio, who then fired him 5 weeks into filming. Michael J. Fox, who was cast as Marty McFly, was revealed to be the perfect choice in the end. The time-skipping episode. A scene from Back to the Future 2 takes place on November 5, 1955, and it features Marty McFly from the past. An episode of The Honeymooners called The Man from Space is shown during this sequence. Having said that, this is not true. Actually, The Honeymooners episode that aired on November 5, 1955, was titled The Sleepwalker and not The Man from Space. Nearly 2 months after its scheduled air date, on December 31, 1955, The Man from Space really went on broadcast. Presenting something in the wrong time frame is what this mistake is called an anachronism. It is possible that the producers chose that episode for dramatic effect or did not check the air dates. The Honeymooners was on that day in 1955. However, the episode depicted in the film does not match what would have been on TV that day, even though the film is not based on a factual story. Finally, it's worth mentioning that genres like Western and rock and roll are essential in movies. The show uses subtle, recurring jokes to humorously highlight generational disparities. Throughout the Back to the Future films, you can find witty references and hidden messages. Marty, Michael J. Fox, and Doc, Christopher Lloyd, visit and nod at different times, and these little details connect them. Well-known artists and writers. As homages to different times, places, and aspects of popular culture, the subtle comedy enhances the future scenario. Time travel, rock and roll, and westerns all play important roles in the Back to the Future movies for different reasons. The franchise's tone is heavily influenced by Marty's affinity for rock and roll and Doc's preoccupation with the Wild West, amplified by these subtle puns. Not to mention that a lot of these gags draw attention to a subtle joke that's been running throughout the show. What is considered commonplace by one age may be completely alien to another.